I would like to make a few comments.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad.
We see Americans hating each other, fighting each other, killing each other at home.
There is a religious war going on in this country. It is a cultural war. This war is for the soul of America.
Because of the way this society is organized, you have to expect that there are going to be such explosions.
Our side, our side, our side.
It is a crisis that strikes at the very heart and soul and spirit of our national.
We are a people in a quandary about the present. We are a people in search of our future.
And as we see and hear these things, millions of Americans cry out in anguish, did we come all this way for this?
It all seems a long way from a time when politics was a national passion and sometimes even fun.
We are attempting on a larger scale to fulfill the promise of America.
We're met here as Americans, not as Democrats or Republicans, to solve that problem.
Welcome to the Pothole Problem Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Miller. This week's episode is a bit of a departure because our guest this week is somebody who doesn't really work in the political world, but of course what she does is deeply enmeshed in the political, and she does have a perspective on outrage. Our discussion was a little more personal than usual, though they're all pretty personal, but this guest spoke a lot about her own personal journey. So I guess I should probably introduce her. This is a person that I met at a author's book talk at Portland State University, and we were both part of the group that was invited to dinner afterwards to sit and talk to the author. I actually spent most of my time at the other end of the table talking to my guest this week, Anita Ramachandran. She's the executive director of MicroMentor, an organization within Mercy Corps, and we'll talk a little bit about what Mercy Corps is and what she does as the executive director of MicroMentor in the interview. So I think we probably ought to just get right into it. Here is Anita Ramachandran. Why don't you tell me just a little bit about what Mercy Corps is and what you do for this organization?
So Mercy Corps is an international, it's a global organization that works in over 40 countries around the world. And the work that we do is really diverse depending on where the intervention is. Usually it's sort of precipitated by some sort of a disaster and a crisis. So that could be natural or not. So we're right now responding to Dorian in the Caribbean, but we also do work in Syria around the refugee situation. We're in countries like Colombia and Tunisia, so it really just depends on the need. Specifically, I'll speak to what drew me here is how our approach is really very inclusive. It's based on community-driven approaches or ideas that are coming from the community, and also like filling a gap that exists rather than going and duplicating what somebody else is doing. And innovation is really at our core. So we're always looking at ways that we can do things differently, better, more efficiently. As part of that, we have an office within Mercy Corps, the Innovation Office, and that's where I sit. And I lead a social enterprise. It's called MicroMentor. So my role is I'm the executive director of MicroMentor, which is a social business that supports entrepreneurs around the world with access to volunteer mentoring. The best analogy I can use for MicroMentor is it's a dating site. So entrepreneurs come from all over the world. They sign up. They say what their business challenge is, what their needs are. Mentors are coming from all over the world. They're signing up. There's something that they might have seen in an ad or a message or through a partnership, seen that, I think I'd like to give back and share what I know. At MicroMentor, we definitely are trying to break many barriers. One of them being that mentorship is a very elite concept and only certain people can be mentors. I believe that if you have a skill, if you have a talent, if you have experience, you can share it. You don't have to be the CEO of a company to do that. You could be somebody that's run a business for a couple of years and you know how difficult it was to get it off the ground, and you have something to share to an entrepreneur in the US or Mexico or Africa or anywhere. So the idea that mentorship doesn't have to lie in one hierarchy, and then the people that are receiving it are in a different hierarchy, is one of the things that we're trying to break down, is to say anyone can give back.
How did you get involved in this? Were you a mentor? Are you a former entrepreneur?
Maybe I am. I started a nonprofit when I was in my early 20s.
That's entrepreneurial for sure.
With a few women here in Oregon, we started an organization called SAWERA, South Asian Women's Empowerment and Resource Alliance. It was to help South Asian women who are victims of domestic violence here in Oregon. It started becoming clear that most of the resources, mainstream resources, were not culturally sensitive. They didn't quite know how to address, language is probably the least of them. It's really everything. It's like the cultural nuances of somebody who's dealing with this from a South Asian context. And so the nonprofit had both an education as well as a support agenda to it. So a lot of what work I did was talk with community centers, police officers, shelters, to sort of get them to understand.
Was that your entry point into what I often call do-gooding, or did you have prior experience that brought you to that particular thing, or was this just a problem that you saw that you wanted to address?
Yeah, it was just a problem that a few of us saw. There were about 6 or 7 of us who got together. We were helping one woman and then realized that this might be not an isolated case. And there's so many myths around, domestic violence, that it doesn't happen to people who are educated or, who come from a, good socioeconomic background and all of that. So it was definitely something that I just saw a need and felt very drawn to helping.
So I'll ask you the question that I ask all of my guests. What is something that used to outrage you but no longer does, and why the change?
I think it's this notion about expectation from people, like, what should they be doing, or that they should be doing this or should be doing that, and they show up in so many different ways. This should have, could have. It got me really worked up in terms of injustice around why somebody would do something a certain way, whether it's my family or my friends or people close to me, and a lot of self-righteousness around, well, I did this for them and they're not doing this, and
So people doing the sort of expected would outrage you when it seemed to deviate from what you thought was the just thing or the right thing or the kind thing, or
right. And outrage, I don't know if that's the word. I would be like disdain, sort of complete lack of ability to understand it, and extreme disappointment. And
I would say extreme disappointment and outrage are very close cousins, and disdain is definitely a related
and
emotion.
The need for me to have to process that all the time. That was probably when I realized that it's my problem and it's not theirs.
Right, the self-righteousness was coming from you, and that was fueling your disappointment and your frustration.
And there's always this notion and this need for me to have to process that and say, well, so-and-so, and they did this or they didn't do this or whatever. And then I realized, I forget whether it was a class or a book, this idea that if a guy comes and snatches your bag and in the process knocks you down and runs away with it, he's done what he needs to do. Why he did it or whatever is a different matter. Now, I can sit and stew and stew and stew, and no change is going to happen. Absolutely nothing. Versus I can, sort of move on from it. Now, if then I've taken whatever it is that he intended or didn't intend, and I'm just have let it stick inside of me. And now it's become a problem for me. I'm continuously upset about something when he's gone.
How could somebody do this to me? What's wrong with them? Why?
He's totally done. He's done. He's accomplished, and he'll deal with whatever he has to do. But it was my problem. It was mine to keep and mine to leave. It still happens. People do things and I still feel affected, but it's become, I'm a little bit more Teflon coating around it.
What were some of the specific practices that you engaged in to help you along that path?
I think I probably went through years not even thinking about this and just working on autopilot. I probably never even addressed it. Maybe I did in small ways, but really, I want to say a good portion of my life was probably just done playing out my own patterns and conditioning in a very sort of, natural way.
Right.
It's probably been life events that pushed me to maybe pain or trauma, and where I've had to step back and say, how did I get here, and what happened, and why am I feeling this way? That allowed me to do a little bit more introspection, because I didn't I don't like being in pain. Yes. So it felt like, okay, well, clearly doing the same thing is going to not yield different results, so I have to do something different. So those moments in time, which life always affords me one of those, and another growth opportunity, made me sort of focus and think about my own role and like my own family of origin or my conditioning, my patterns, whatever that might be. So I've done a variety of different things, from intensive work, like doing like week-long in retreat around examining my role in this world. And so I've done that. I've definitely read books. I speak to. I've surrounded myself with people who really matter in my life. I've sort of let go of the ones that are not contributing, and where I can contribute and they can. It's like, so I've invested probably the most amount of time on myself in the last 8 years.
So self-investment in, what can we call this, psychological growth, personal growth? Personal growth,
yeah.
Has helped
and
you.
I know that it's a lifelong process, it's never going to end.
You're listening to the Pothole Problem podcast, created by White Tiger Productions. At White Tiger Productions, we create experiences. If you have an idea for a podcast, a workshop, or a show of any kind, we'll help you go from concept to execution. We provide creative direction and production support. We've got a podcast studio, writers and storytellers, sound engineers and editors, designers, videographers, hosts, creative coaches, everything you need to manifest your creative potential. You name it or even vaguely describe it, and we'll take you from dream to finished product. White Tiger Productions. You can do what you think, and we can help you. Visit us at youkandowhatyoutthink.com and tell us what you're thinking about.
So, you have more or less successfully overcome this disdain, self-righteousness, but yet you still do have some outrage.
Yeah.
So what are the sources of your outrage still, and are you trying to work through that, or are you happy to hold on to your other forms of outrage? You mentioned inequality earlier. Is that something you're trying to feel less outraged about, or are you comfortable with being outraged by that?
I want to say that my outrage, or those extreme reactions that I would have, are things that I'm able to turn around a little faster than before, instead of letting it simmer for a long time and not knowing it. I have tried to take a negative situation and try to understand what my role can be, because what's not helpful is for me to be passively outraged about things that are happening and not do anything about it, because then it's just like, I'm taking it in, not doing anything about it. So
now, you work for an organization that is basically constantly addressing pretty terrible situations in the world. Some of them human created, many of them, some are natural disasters. Many of them are political or social disasters. So you're facing this sort of thing daily, right? Is there something that you tell yourself that helps you to get to work every day and not be crushed by just disappointment in the world?
Absolutely. I actually, one of the things that, this is a very personal way for me to cope with this, is I don't engage too much with day-to-day news. I just don't. I've realized that my purpose in life is to make this world a better place in a way that I can. And just constantly reading about everything that's happening is not helpful to me.
So you stay out of the news cycle. How do you get information?
I'll browse through and choose to read one New York Times article. I don't watch the news on a daily basis. I pick and choose what I want to read. You
don't get pulled into the vortex of the news cycle and all that it can come
also because what it does is it creates that outrage, and it takes away from my current purpose, which is to do this job and to do it really well. To take care of the community, the global community of entrepreneurs. It's to take care of people that are in my team and the relationships that are in my small sphere. And if I take myself out of it because I'm upset about something that Trump did one day, I'm letting all of those factors take away from my purpose, and I think that's a bigger loss.
That's a great perspective. It's very difficult, though, to resist the pull of the vortex. And have you just gotten good at it? I mean, you still have the newsfeed on your phone, right? You didn't take that off, so you haven't.
I have it. I'm.
You see the headlines, so you haven't just put yourself into a dark corner where there's no news coming at you except for what you seek out. So you're able to withstand the stream of headlines and yet not get pulled in.
Because there's couple of things. One is that I think when there's all of this, initially what happened was complete apathy. I can't do anything about this. So I'm just frustrated, I'm upset. When Trump got elected, I was in Mexico for an international conference around volunteering. I was going to be speaking at like 8 a.m. and the previous night this came. And I was a mess. I was crying till like 4 a.m. because I was thinking about all these years that I spent around women's rights and like working on that, and I felt like all of that was just a waste, like this is what we've done. And then I realized that, yeah, it feels like that, but I don't think when we're in the midst of it that we have the ability to zoom out and look at it from 20, 50, 100 years from now, like this trajectory of what it's doing. We don't have that ability to see it. Young people standing up and speaking for their rights, talking about what they need, people coalescing and creating movements and changes, the Me Too movement or around climate. It's activating us in a different way, and we wouldn't know what the result is for a very long time. The thing that I knew is that I just had to keep doing the thing that I can do. However small it is, I just have to keep doing my thing. I'm not able to
pick a lane and zoom in that lane.
I would love to participate in the rallies and be there and take a cause and really be activist around something because I care about all these things deeply. I just know that my action there is going to be less powerful than me taking the actions that I do on a daily basis because my work is also related to social good. So since I'm already doing that on a daily basis, I just feel like I should just get really good at doing that. And doing this in a way that is breakthrough. So really creating change at a massive scale. Like how can we help not thousands but hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs? How do we get people to give back without wanting to be paid? We could have 1 million mentors easily, like we should, right? If everybody said, I'm really frustrated with what's going on in the world, I'm going to turn around and help somebody.
So having an impact in one area, a pretty big impact, helps you to stay drilling deep in one area and stay in that lane you've chosen and avoid kind of spreading out. And then you mentioned earlier apathy that can come. Do you see that as a problem among young activists who go from energized outrage to apathy because they spread their efforts around too much, or they're wanting to change everything at once?
I actually don't think that about the young people. I think this is a new generation. People are really sticking with it. Like young people are sticking with it, I mean, Park Lane, those kids have not given up.
Right.
They're still fighting, and it's going to be almost 2 years.
And they have picked the cause picked them, but they have stayed in that lane. They're drilling deep.
Because my daughter just started at American University, and I was there doing new parent orientation, sitting next to one of the Park Lane parents, one of the kids that's actually part of the movement. And some of them have taken gap years. This is their primary focus, regardless of what they're doing. I just see that young people are not doing the thing that I feel like somehow in our generation we might have done, like, become really activists when we were in college, and then, then you say, oh, well, real life.
Just shaking our fists at the injustices of the world in general.
And then real life takes up,
out.
and then, of course you have a family and you have kids, and, I can't be thinking about these things. I have to be more balanced, middle of the road. All of those words start coming in. I'm more optimistic about the younger people. I think I'm a little worried about the middle of the road people that may or may not stay invested.
So it seems to me that your advice is focus on something that you can have an impact on. Now, the difficult question would be, I'm a person who has 5 or 10 different interests or outrages. Yeah. And if your advice is, well, pick one and drill down and work hard on that, stay in your lane, how do you pick, though? What helps you sift through the set of things that just make you crazy about the world? Because there are plenty of things. Yeah. And if it's pick something and work hard in that area and have an impact, what helps you do that?
In my case, it just picked me. I'm fortunate that it picked me. I do care about some other topics. I do care about personal growth and development and people connecting. I feel like one of the challenges we have is that we don't connect as human beings with one another. I'm hoping that our work with MicroMentor is really about creating human connection for change, and that unlikely pairs are going to connect and help each other with literally no reason why they should be doing that. There's no hidden agenda here. So the more you can do where you can feel it and you can actually connect with other people, I think the better we understand that these differences are going to exist forever. We're never going to get past those. I donate where I can. So, I donate to Planned Parenthood. I'll donate, to causes that touch me. I think my money might go farther than me going there and spending whatever time that I need to, or investing some of the energy that I can, because that will just be like, it won't move the needle. It's not that I have, suddenly now entrepreneurship is my biggest passion in the world. I care about lots of things. But I really care that, I think that the biggest problem we are facing is probably like an emotional poverty, psychological one, rather than anything else. So I think the more that we can create empathy for each other and we can connect with one another, I think that's, whatever it is that you pick, use that lens.
Right. Well, you say emotional poverty, and that makes me think that we are poor in certain emotions because we have plenty of emotions. Our emotions exist 100% of the time, 24/7. It's just that if certain emotions crowd others out, and that's why I talk about outrage with a lot of people, because outrage can be a very crowding out kind of emotion.
Yeah.
And it generates other very powerful emotions that also crowd out frustration, anger, fear, or apathy, powerlessness. These things can crowd out the room that we have for empathy, the room that we have for focused passion, the room that we have just for love. That's one of the reasons why I ask about people overcoming their outrage is because to me it seems like a way to make more room for other feelings that will then help us to do what we think is necessary. And people have different views on what will make the world a better place.
Yeah.
But if there's more room for everybody to work towards making the world a better place, even though there's going to be conflict and diversity of what those images are, then it seems like that's going to be a step forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I was reading this book, which was a friend of mine gave it to me, and I couldn't put it down. I read it on the plane when I was traveling most recently. It's called Reboot. It's by this guy named Jerry Colonna. It's about, he provides consulting and coaching and leadership for people that are in business leadership positions, but the book was a complete surprise to me because it was really about personal development and growth. And it had this story, which I'm sure you've heard from, it's like more of a Buddhist story, where the student asked Pema Chondron, I'm suffering and I'm going through this really hard time, and she sort of said, go around your neighborhood and collect a mustard seed for every person that's not suffering. And sure enough, person came back empty-handed. So suffering is universal. We just have to understand what's our role and how do we handle that individually. When I have these extreme emotions, I absolutely have one. I think I am so far to go in terms of actually figuring out my life and what I need to do, and stumbling and getting back up. That's going to be a lifelong process. But what I've realized is when I'm going through outrage or these extreme emotions, it's always an opportunity for me to see, why is this happening to me? Like, why do I feel this? Because unless I unpack that, I'm not going to be productive in the solution space.
Right. Use it as an opportunity for introspection rather than just turning outward at the world and howling at the injustice.
Yeah.
Or the...
And I'm not saying that those are not important feelings, because you need to be excited and outraged and feel deeply about something.
They can be motivating.
They can be motivating. But unfortunately, I can't be productive in what I do until I see what I'm doing. What am I bringing to this? If I don't unpack that, then I'm just going to, maybe perpetuate the problem, but just in a different way. So that's probably been my thing is, and I've tried to shorten the cycle of my extreme emotions from years to months to now weeks.
But as you say, it's a lifelong process of getting better at this. So I would end by asking you to give some recommendations about readings or organizations that you think are worthy. You've already given one, Reboot. That'll be in the show notes for anybody who's interested in following that up. We'll get some links to that. Anything else that you would recommend to my listeners that they read or look at? I've become more of a advocate of personal growth and development lately, and so I would say that the books that helped me range from personal development to leadership. When Things Fall Apart is a book by Pema Chondron that I really like and I pick up all the time, because it's a good way for me to remember and remind myself around acceptance and
and letting go and, what I can do. I really like Grit by Angela Duckworth. I know that there have been a couple of memoirs, I think Becoming by Michelle Obama, Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. These have all given me a nice variety perspective of how different people lead their lives. They all go through phases of disappointments and successes and outrage and all of that, and where they're channeling it and how they've chosen to
We can learn
make
from
lives.
their suffering and their path through it.
Yeah.
Well, I really want to thank you for taking the time to sit with me today. This has been really interesting. I appreciate your perspective.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks for seeking the perspective.
Well, that's another episode in the can, and I would like to thank Anita very much. That interview was recorded a couple of months ago, actually, at her offices in the Mercy Corps building in downtown Portland. I had scheduled it for this week originally, and there's a kind of a happy synchronicity to that, which is that I just got done with a 3-day silent meditation retreat, talk about personal growth and the journey away from self-righteous disdain. It was certainly a helpful experience for me. That's the third time I've done that, and each time it's helped me to increase my serenity and to make my serenity more sustainable. I want to share a story that the teacher at this last retreat gave to us on the last night's kind of Buddhism Dharma lecture. This was a kind of classic Zen story, according to him. So there's a farmer and his son in, ancient wherever, and a wild horse wanders into their paddock and kind of becomes their horse. And all the neighbors say to the farmer, they say, well, that's really good luck. What a great thing to happen to you. And the farmer says, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We'll see. And the next day, the son is riding the horse, and the horse throws him off, and he breaks his leg. And the neighbors say this time, they say, oh no, what a terrible thing, what a tragedy. And the farmer says, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We'll see. The next day, the army comes through looking to draft young men to take them away to the wars, and they don't take the farmer's son because he has the broken leg. The neighbors say, oh, that's very good luck. What good luck? And of course, the farmer says, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We'll see. So there is my retelling of the Zen story that was told to me this past weekend. You can make of that story whatever you want to make of it. And I will leave you to those thoughts. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank Anita for the thought-provoking interview. And of course, I want to thank the band that submitted this week's song. It's the Breds, a group of people who live in Seattle currently and who are from various places. This is their original song called Tiny Hands.
Reckon by now he got what he came here for. Came here by the blood red, pushed him through the door. Your folks are at the table, praying for an end to their pain. I'll keep moving till we're off the rails again. Take my hand so we can rise from the ashes again. Take my hand so we can rise from the ashes again. To the paper, a lie to the screen, smoke to the lung, a bullet to the scene. Will you look down, or will our eyes meet? from the ashes again. By now, he's kept his pockets filled. Colors fade to darkness out my windowsill. We're all needing something as far as the eye can see. Look down, or will our eyes meet? Take my hand so we can rise from the ashes.